please refer to your owner's manual for instructions on removing your carburetor and stock reed cage. Hi, in this video I'm going to go over the procedure of installing VForce 3 reeds in a 1995 CR250. But this video applies to any bike that has rubber tabs on the intake manifold that extend into the stock reed cage as seen here. Here we can see how the stock reed cage fits over the rubber tabs on the intake manifold. These tabs will prevent installation of the VForce 3 reed cage, so it will be necessary to remove them for proper fitment. For this job, you'll need 2 intake manifold bolts. For me, they're 8mm, 2 washers supplied with the VForce reeds, 2 10mm nuts, which were also supplied with the reeds, and a hacksaw and correctly sized wrenches. Now to begin, we're going to take the intake manifold and place one of the bolts through a corner hole. And then on top of that, we're going to place one of the washers that came included with our VForce kit. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side with the other bolt. Place our second washer and then place the stock reed cage over the bolts. Then we're going to take our 2 10mm nuts and tighten them with our fingers onto each one of the bolts. Then we're going to place one wrench on the bolts to hold it in place, while we take another wrench to tighten the 2 10mm nuts on a fair amount. They don't need to be too tight, but they need to be tight enough that it keeps the reed cage stiff and rigid on the intake manifold. Now, because we have those washers in there, there's going to be about a 20 thou gap in between the intake manifold and the reed cage. That's where we're going to place the hacksaw blade to chop off these rubber tabs. So any old hacksaw will work for this. I've got a metal cutting blade on here, but really any blade should work just fine. And now all we're going to do is place the hacksaw blade into the side that doesn't have the bolts on it and start sawing through the rubber tabs. Just take your time and try to get as clean of a cut as possible. As I'm sure you've already noticed, I already did this on my intake manifold, but I'm just showing you the process here. Now, once you get all the way down to the bolts, you're going to take the bolts out and swap sides. So if you started with your bolts on the top side, you'll take them out and place them on the bottom side to finish off that last little section of rubber tab that should still be there. And vice versa, if you started on the bottom, then you'll take them to the top side to finish off the small last section. You may not need to swap sides. If your intake manifold is different than mine, you might have just been able to cut through in one pass, but I had to swap sides. Now this is how your intake manifold should end up looking. It should be very smooth as possible. If you have any rough, hard, jagged sections, you might want to try sand to get off some to smooth it out. You just want it to be flat as possible to get the best seal that you can. It's really critical to get a good seal in here. One final note on installing the reed back onto your bike. When you're installing the intake manifold onto the reeds, you need to make sure that the holes line up properly. The holes are not completely centered on the 2 blocks, so you need to make sure that the reeds are flipped in the direction or the orientation